All right. Good afternoon from Kampala, Uganda, from Africa in general. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 past midday. My name is Africa Chiza, and I work with Siatini Uganda, the Southern and Eastern African Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. I wish to welcome you, everyone, and thank you for having joined us, and to the others that are still joining. I wish to extend my heartfelt thanks for having committed your time to this important discussion. This first segment of the webinar on the African Continental Free Trade Area is organized by Luxembourg Stiftung, offices of Dar es Salaam, Berlin, Brussels, Dakar, and Tunis, and in partnership with Siatini Uganda, and to the periphery also with the East African Trade Network, based in Kenya Secretariat. Today we are privileged to have a number of distinguished panelists to take us through our webinar on the African Continental Free Trade Area, the state of play, and we'll be looking at the readiness, but also the pitfalls in the implementation or rolling out of trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area. You will take note that trading under the AfCFTA commenced on 1st January 2021, and there has been a number of hopes and perceptions on what this means, especially regarding readiness due to COVID-19, but also due to what some people call an ambitious liberalization agenda that the AfCFTA has, which is taking the same trend like all other free trade agreements that focus on increasing trade liberalization rather than focusing on transforming aspects of bolstering production and productivity, which are critical in promoting sustainable development. Those are perceptions nonetheless, and to take us through whether these perceptions are true, to take us through whether there are a lot of other things that we need to look into, is a panel of distinguished guests. One is our keynote speaker, Mr. Prudence Bahizi. Mr. Prudence Bahizi is the Chief Technical Advisor on the African Continental Free Trade Area and head of the AfCFTA unit. If we talk about the chief architects of the AfCFTA and the brains behind the AfCFTA, then Mr. Prudence is at the helm and at the apex of that. Again, we have Dr. Isaac Shinyekwa, who is the head of Trade and Regional Integration Department at the Economic Policy Research Center. Now, Dr. Shinyekwa is renowned with research, rigorous research for reputable institutions like the World Bank, International Food Policy Research Institute, UNCTAD, the African Growth Initiative of Brookings Institute, and the United Nations University. But most importantly, he is the member of the African Union Malabo Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, the CADAP, and is also part of Uganda's delegation whenever we are engaging in trade negotiations at the regional level and at the global level. Needless to say that he is also in charge of spearheading research on the ESC trade policy, but also implication, a policy study on negotiations of free trade agreements with third parties and what this means for the East African community. Our third panelist is Ms. Nada Trigui from Tunis, who is a political economist and activist who has worked on issues of trade justice, food and environmental rights from the perspective of the Arab Maghreb region, which is one of the acknowledged building blocks for the African continental free trade area. So without too much ado, dear participants, let me start with Prudence. Mr. Prudence, you are the chief engineer, architect of the CFTA. You promised us a lot regarding the benefits. We have rolled out trade. Could you please take us through the state of play of the trading? What are the issues you look out for? And anything you think that governments need to consider when they are developing their implementation, CFTA implementation strategies. Mr. Prudence, please, you the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Kiza, for that good introduction, which gives me the courage to speak confidently on matters of AfCFTA. Let me also start by thanking the organizers, especially Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiation Institute, CIATINI, and Rosa Luxembourg think tank for organizing successfully this event, but more importantly for extending your invitation to me to share with you my experience on AfCFTA. In so doing, I have prepared a short presentation which I want to share with you. I will try to move quickly because time will not allow me to go into the nitty-gritties of the presentation, but I will at least touch on the key areas that will respond to your question. As a way of introduction, which you have already done, I would like to remind the audience that on the 1st of January 2021, we started officially trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And this can be seen as a very big step, a very big milestone for the continent compared to other stages of integration. So this is one of the biggest, because the AfCFTA is seen as the foundation of African integration agenda. So the date of signing, the 21st of March 2018 in Kigali, was also historic. The entry into force of the agreement in May 2019 was also historic, but start of trading is more historic. So that's why I said this is a very significant milestone in the African integration agenda. This was officially celebrated by the heads of state as well as other Africans across the globe. Even the business community all over the world was celebrating this event of start of trading. And the AfCFTA is seen as the savior, as Africa's savior after having tested the COVID pandemic effects. So we believe that AfCFTA is going to assist Africa in achieving quick recovery. So we believe that all 55 African members are going to be part of the AfCFTA agenda. Today we have 54 who have already signed out of 55. And we have 36 who have ratified and deposited their instrument of ratification. And this is a very good indicator that the AfCFTA is for all African countries. So in terms of readiness, I have to tell you that the AfCFTA is part of a long journey. Africa is moving toward achieving African Union Agenda 2063, which will allow us to have Africa we want. But to achieve Agenda 2063, there are a number of programs and projects that have to be implemented, and is one of them. So AfCFTA is part of the integration agenda, part of the African Union Continental Integration Agenda. And you are familiar with regional economic communities. Regional economic communities are the foundation or the building blocks of this integration agenda. And AfCFTA comes in as part of the journey. It is expected that after having achieved full implementation of the AfCFTA, which is a free trade area, we will move to a continental customs union, eventually to a continental common market. And the ultimate goal is to achieve African Economic Community, which will bring together all economic and trade policies, and even achieving one common monetary policy for the continent. So this is a long journey, but it's promising. In terms of what we have achieved so far, I would like to bring your attention to the scope of the AfCFTA. Establishing the AfCFTA has a number of protocols that are attached to it and become integral part of it. There is a protocol on trade in goods, a protocol on trade in services, and a protocol on rules and procedures for the settlement of disputes. And these three protocols were signed together with the agreement on 21st of March 2018 in Kigali. We have other protocols that have to be concluded as part of phase 2 negotiation. The protocol on competition, the protocol on intellectual property rights, the protocol on investment, and the protocol on e-commerce or digital trade. And we are likely to have in future a protocol on women in trade to be also added to the number of protocols. And as you can see, each protocol also has annexes and appendices, which I may not have time to go into details, but that's how comprehensive the AfCFTA legal instrument is. The key milestone that we can celebrate in achieving the AfCFTA agenda, in February 2012, that's when a decision was made to establish the AfCFTA here in Addis Ababa. And in March 2018, the agreement was signed. In 2019, the agreement came into force on the 30th of May. And in July 2019, the heads of state launched the operational phase of the AfCFTA. And on the 1st of January this year, we started trading within the AfCFTA, which marked actually the actual implementation of the agreement. And we are targeting to conclude all outstanding negotiations by end of this year. So these are the key milestones in the AfCFTA journey, and we hope that we are going to meet the deadline. In terms of scope, for those who are familiar with the trade agreements, AfCFTA is comprehensive. in a sense that when you compare it to other free trade areas, or when you compare it to other integration programs on the continent, AfCFTA is probably going to be the deepest form of integration for the continent. This will answer to the question many have been asking, whether AfCFTA is going to replace the existing regional economic communities. When you go through the checklist of areas that are covered by regional economic communities, from elimination of tariff to elimination of non-tariff barriers, SPS measures, trade remedies, and other trade policies and trade-related policies that are addressed under regional economic communities, you can see that AfCFTA is, when you look at the last column of this, this table, the AfCFTA is the deepest form of integration that we may have on the continent. So if we successfully implement AfCFTA, then we will be taking a step ahead of existing regional economic communities. And as I said, this is part of the Agenda 2063, among other continental programs on peace and security, political affairs, good governance, and many other programs that feed into Agenda 2063. For trade in goods alone, we have 9 annexes, which cover the tariff liberalization, rules of origin, customs cooperation, trade facilitation, elimination of non-tariff barriers, technical barriers to trade, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, transit, and trade remedies. Those 9 areas have got each their own specific annexes, their own specific legal instrument that govern them. And all those annexes are part and parcel of the AfCFTA agreement, and they have been concluded. You can look at this map. AfCFTA combines a big market compared to other important markets that we know. We are talking about 1.2 billion people in Africa. You can see biggest economies such as Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia having the biggest size of population, DRC, South Africa, and others, and Tanzania, some of the most attractive markets on the continent. And you look at Africa, it's much bigger than Europe combined. Europe was estimated at 711 million people, whereas Africa, we are more than 1.2 billion people. The United States is around 300 million people. So Africa is a significant market if we have to achieve this African continental free trade area. In terms of schedule for tariff liberalization, which is also an important aspect to bring out, the AfCFTA aims to achieve 90% liberalization as the level of ambition, which has to be achieved in 5 years for non-least developed countries and 10 years for least developed countries. Then, in addition to 90%, countries will also have to liberalize their sensitive products over a longer period of time, which is 10 years for non-least developed countries and 13 years for least developed countries. So in the next 13 years, we should be able to achieve in total 97% of tariff liberalization on the continent. And 3% will be excluded from liberalization. And the criteria to designate products, whether they are sensitive or non-sensitive, have also been agreed on. It will be the choice of every country to come up with that list based on those criteria, issues of food security, national security, fiscal revenue, livelihood, and industrialization. So those are the factors that may justify excluding a product from liberalization or delaying liberalization of that specific product. The other aspect that I want to bring to your attention is that currently we have 41 countries that have already submitted their tariff offers, which make about 75% of AU membership. And those countries are here on the list. They are countries within East African Community who submit the joint tariff offer, ECOWAS members who also submit their joint tariff offer, CEMAC, which is the Central African Monetary Union, also submitted a joint tariff offer, and SACU, which is the Southern Africa Customs Union, and then those other countries that have added to the 4 customs unions. We have been able to conclude up to 82% of rules of origin. And as I said, 36 countries have ratified the agreement out of 54 who already signed it. So I think this gives a picture on where we are in terms of achieving the AfCFTA. Trying to explain more about rules of origin, which is a very important aspect when it comes to trade liberalization. AfCFTA rules of origin have come up with what we call product-specific rules. It means that each and every product that goes on the market has got its own rules of origin that are applicable. And the rules of origin are applied based on these criteria. One is that if a product is fully produced on the continent, fully, meaning a plant or a vegetable that has been grown on the continent qualifies to be fully or wholly produced from the continent. Live animals, fish, energy that is produced from the continent and others. Then the second criteria is justification of substantial transformation of that product. And substantial transformation can be justified based on the value addition or the value of non-originating materials, the value of raw materials that you import from outside, or what we call change in tariff heading. All those justifications have got a threshold on each and every product. So if you are selling milk, they will look at the source of materials and the value addition that you have added. And if there is anything that has been imported, it also has to be meeting the threshold. So those are the criteria in general, but each of those criteria is linked to a specific number in terms of percentage. And we aim to conclude all outstanding rules by end of June this year. Then we have 100% rules of origin on all products that are traded. Here is just a picture of what I was talking about. What we call 2% of agreed rules of origin is about 4,409 tariff lines or products out of 5,387 total products that are traded globally, recognized by the World Customs Organization in what they call a harmonized system of tariff heading or tariff coding. So only a few products are still under negotiation to complete 100% of all traded products in terms of defining their rules of origin. This percentage of a 2%, we have also looked at it in terms of volume of trade that is covered. And we have noticed that about 82% of trade that is now on the continent has got already corresponding rules of origin within the AfCFTA. So there is no fear that the remaining rules of origin will hamper trade, because statistics show that the coverage is good enough, at least to cater for the next few months before we conclude outstanding issues. But all in all, we have to understand that by end of June, we have all rules of origin completed. Let me move a bit to trade in services. I've spoken about trade in goods. The AfCFTA also complies agreement on trade in goods, and I mean trade in services. And you can see that the nature of services, every trade transaction is followed by a service. You are trading goods. You look at this is just a picture of supply chain from raw materials to consumer, raw materials, supplier, manufacturer, distribution, customer service, and then to the consumer. This supply chain is a mixture of transaction which involve different services, which involve transport services, logistics services, communication services, financial services. So there are a number of services that are embedded into the entire supply chain of goods. And this agreement was looking at trade in services because it will have to complement the transaction on trade in goods. But it will go further to also look at what we call market access restrictions at national level, allowing service providers to go and provide services in other African countries. So the agreement on trade in services looks into different national regulations in a bid to eliminate all restrictions that are embedded in national regulations in different service sectors. And when I'm talking about service sectors, you have to understand we have 12 service sectors, business services, which include professional services, computer-related services, research and development, real estate. We have category 2 called communication services. We have category 3, construction services, distribution services, education services. I'm just listing for the sake of time. Environmental services, financial services, health-related and social services, transport and tourism and travel-related services, recreational services, and other services. So that's the comprehensive list that is defined for services. So when you go through it, you look at the subsectors, you will understand what type of liberalization is affected by AfCFTA. Let me quickly move to implementation matters before I conclude my presentation.
Okay, please.
Yes, I will try to be brief. We have to ensure that all members are mobilized to achieve 100% signature of the agreement. We have to ensure that all members of the African Union ratify the agreement. We have, of course, to finalize outstanding negotiations. But more importantly, there are a number of actions that have to be taken at national level. This includes putting in place and strengthening AfCFTA institutions at national level, harmonizing policies at national level, aligning them with the AfCFTA legal instrument, as well as undertaking other preparatory activities like coming up with national strategies. We have a number of countries that have already completed their national strategies at national level who are ready to implement the AfCFTA agreement. The AfCFTA agreement is so complex. If you don't relook your national policies, it will be very difficult to appropriately implement it. We also have other complementary activities that will support implementation of the AfCFTA, such as the platform to assist elimination of non-tariff barriers, which is already put in place, and we work with the stakeholders to ensure that all non-tariff barriers are reported and resolved on time. We have what we call the AfCFTA tariff negotiation portal, which is online portal used by chief negotiators to ensure that they achieve 97% tariff liberalization. We have mobile applications on AfCFTA, which are already operating and being used by business community. we are developing Africa Trade Observatory, which will be the source of trade information on Africa in terms of export, imports, and other trade measures. There is a Pan-African payment and settlement system, which is also being established to assist in transactions, to reduce the transaction costs. Studies have shown that Africa is losing about $5 billion annually related to the transaction costs in terms of currency convertibility. So if you sell products in your national currency, you receive money in another currency, then you have to transact to convert again in your national currency. The exchange rate costs up to $5 billion a year for Africa. So the Pan-African payments and settlement system will allow to transact directly regardless of the difference in the currencies without incurring additional costs. We are also establishing a facility called FCFTA Adjustment Facility that will assist the members that are negatively affected by trade liberalization. So this facility will put in place credit lines and other financial support to African countries who have difficulties in implementing the FCFTA. Last but not least is the African Business Council, which is now being established as a forum for private sector engagement in the FCFTA. So this is an institution for private sector. I have spoken about what has to be done at national level. This one I will skip. I don't want to talk about impact, but let me just summarize this in one slide. This market liberalization will come with a lot of opportunities. There will be consumer welfare gains. The FCFTA market, being a huge market for the continent, is going to attract investors, African investors, as well as investors from outside. It's going to contribute to job creation. It's going to eliminate poverty, and it is also going to ensure income distribution. So these are just statements, but which are backed by technical studies. So we have statistics and associated findings on each of those expected benefits for the FCFTA. I will share with you the slides to see what impact are we talking about when it comes to consumer welfare. What impact are we talking about in terms of attracting investment, job creation, poverty elimination, and income distribution? So in terms of poverty reduction, FCFTA is going to lift up to 100 million Africans out of poverty. This is an estimate by World Bank out of their technical research. It's going to ensure income distribution in terms of adjusting salaries among skilled and non-skilled labor, among women and men, and it is also contributing to job creation in different sectors. So this is what the next slides showing in terms of graphs. But all in all, the FCFTA is going to contribute to economic growth for the continent. It will rise Africa's GDP by 7%, which is actually a good way of offsetting the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. COVID has affected Africa's economies, but now FCFTA is going to boost that economy by 7%. And if COVID has affected by -3%, then you can see that FCFTA is a savior to our continent. So I would like to conclude by encouraging each and everyone to play their role in the implementation of the FCFTA, because FCFTA is for the people, is for all stakeholders, and everyone has a role to play. And FCFTA is going to take us to the next level of economic development, of welfare, of well-being. Last but not least is that FCFTA is an opportunity for Africa. If we don't embrace it, we don't think Africa will get another better opportunity than implementing FCFTA. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak for that long. I have to end my opening remarks here and hand over back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bwana Prudence. The presentation was amazing. Indeed, no sooner had you reached the middle than participants were asking for the copy of the presentation. That shows how exciting the presentation was. And yes, to the participants, we promised to share sending through this presentation when it is done, after this webinar. Joining us after hearing from Prudence, the elaborate presentation will be Dr. Shinyakwa. Dr. Shinyakwa, you are coming in to give us experiences from East African community as one of the building blocks, which Prudence clearly acknowledged, of the AfCFTA. And when we talk about the ESC, East African community, it comes at a very sad moment when we have lost one of the biggest champions, Pan-Africanism, of Africa's integration, one of the biggest son of Africa, His Excellency Dr. John Pombe Magufuli, former president of the Republic of Tanzania. He will be greatly missed, and I ask all of you to bear him and his soul in your thoughts and in your prayers. We pray that the Lord grants him eternal rest. Dr. Shinyakwa,
yes, sir.
From that note, when you look at East African community, what are some of the lessons we can take from the experiences you have been crafting the ESC trade policy? You have been spearheading research on implications of negotiating free trade agreements with third parties on ESC integration and CFTA. You've also done an interesting study looking at the preparedness of East African community to undertake or to utilize the opportunities that the AfCFTA presents us, which Monsieur Prudence identified for us. Please, in 5 to 9 minutes, please, give us, share with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator, and Siatin, then the organizers, that's to say, then Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, for giving me an opportunity to participate in this forum to discuss yet an extremely important topic and aspect of the Africa continental free trade area, something that we are all extremely happy about and say this is the best that could have happened to us at such a time, as the dreams of the people who led Africa to independence bubbled in their minds, and as they looked to the future, I think we have reached a very extremely good time. And I commend Prudence for the presentation he made, which gives us straw or whatever food to chew on in terms of where we have come from, where we are standing, and where we are going. And I'll just very quickly move through what my experience of the ESC are, as the moderator put it. I just want to summarize it, if I may call it an abstract of a sort, that as we move forward to implement the FCTA, we need to look at internal and external factors that are likely to impede or perhaps make it difficult for us to achieve our goals. And I will outline some of these and discuss this in line with the East African community. But let me just give an idea that Africa hosts about 30% of the world's mineral reserves. That is something to note. about 20% of the global annual production of minerals, and in terms of platinum, cobalt, manganese, and others. And it's an oil producing area with many reserves that are not yet even exploited. So, and then about 60% of the world is arable land is found in Africa. When you look at these, they give you an idea that the others outside Africa are looking to see what Africa is doing because they want a very big share of these resources. So that kind of formulates the agenda, the external agenda of the relationship between African countries and the rest of the world, because we attract a lot of attention. That's what I'm trying to say in brief. We look at our global trade, it's only 3%, quite dismal. We look at our interactive trade within the African continent, it's about maybe 16, maybe to 19%. And then look at what do we export to the rest of the world and what do we import from the rest of the world. Like the moderator put it, our analysis for the ESC clearly shows that we export and depend on commodities for our exports with very limited value addition. And therefore, it means we fetch very limited revenue from outside the continent. And then we import products that are manufactured with high technology. So in order for us to realize the dreams of the FCTA, we need to work on things to do with the technology. Without that, it will be a dream, which will remain a dream without realization. Our technology to do value addition is actually a big challenge and a big impediment. Then when you look at what we trade among ourselves, intermediates alone, 88% of intermediates are imported from outside the continent, and we do about 2% among ourselves. So these are areas that we need to develop. If we don't, then the dream we are talking about, then the incomes, the employment we are talking about will just remain a dream. We need to really look into this. So then we have issues. Although we have these frameworks, these are necessary that my colleague Prudence elaborated. These are extremely good. They are necessary. They are necessary, but they're not sufficient. Because even within the ESC, we have frameworks to work on tariffs and non-tariff barriers. With tariffs, we have succeeded, but non-tariff barriers, we are struggling. We even have a law in place, but they keep evolving from one to another. We have had issues of sugar, issues on maize, issues on milk between us and the neighboring countries. What does that mean? If we have these frameworks into place, we need to implement them, we need to respect them to be able to trade. Otherwise, they will just be very nice, like pictures in the sitting room when actually the owners of those pictures already passed on and we buried them. We need to be very careful about that. Logistics are extremely poor at the continental level. We need to work on this, and security issues, we need to work on that. If we don't, infrastructure to enable the movement of these goods. This is a very, very, very important aspect. We will not be able to achieve what we want if we can't work on procedural constraints, all right? Complex clearing procedures, cumbersome documentation requirements. These have to be worked on. If not, then we're not going to realize what we want. Unpredictable trade policies, you see, this contribute to high costs of trade within among the countries. I'll just give you an example. We export more than $80 million worth of maize to Kenya. And recently there was a quick policy about the maize being sold to Kenya. And although the two countries are working out, already farmers have lost quite a lot. Their trade costs have gone high. Some were operating on loans. Of course, we need to work on standards, but in case the standards are not coming forth, how do we handle that? These are issues that we need to. We have a very big issue on e-commerce, whereas the global economies are working hard to to make sure frameworks are developed. I think we are really behind on this one here. E-commerce is in this era is extremely important. What are we doing about this? Because then this will help us. Financing of the Secretariat alone, the East African Secretariat has struggled because of lack of subscription remittances. You see, are we going to see this at the African Union? Are we going to see the European Union and other areas financing the Secretariat, and yet we are competing with them? This is a very, very serious issue. You cannot compete with somebody and then they are financing all your activities. I think we need to look at that. In terms of improving access to finance for the private sector, there are issues here, very strong issues. Commercial loans can never perhaps help us manage this, help the private sector to be able to borrow and conduct trade. Now, we have issues, and this is a strong one. We have so many groups, the European Union, now we have America, I think Britain signed an FTA with Kenya recently. We have many of these that want to sign FTAs with the African countries, with African regions. I think we need to look into this. What is the implication of this? And it coming along with what we call WTO plus requirements, which our countries are not very ready to do this. And if they go into some of these, we are likely not to benefit. I'll just give an example. We have among the WTO plus requirements that have to do with the on intellectual property rights, that have to do with the procurement, that have to do with the settlement of disputes. Now, these will mutilate, so to borrow the word, or make it difficult even to implement the FCTA, because there will be different arrangements with African countries. And already at the ESC level, this is something that we are testing with a lot of difficulty. We failed to sign the economic partnership agreements with the European Union at one point. That one we failed because some countries signed, others are yet to sign. What are the implications of all this as a continent? We need to look at this, and I think this is, to me, is something that's very serious that should be taken on by the Secretariat. If anything, even studies conducted, because if we don't, then we shall find the basket or the pail or the container we're trying to draw water with has some holes in it, like a basket. As you draw water from a lake or from a water source, by the time you reach your destination, there's nothing in the what? In the container. This is very, very, very serious. We have issues of migration, labor, and individuals on the continent. First of all, we have conflicts, we have refugees. How are we going to handle this? Even if we say we are going to have free movement of persons at the continental level, what kind of persons are going to be moving? Will everybody moving at will, or we are looking at movement of skills? So these are very, very strong issues that we need to look at. African continent economies are heterogeneous in nature. There are those that are well advanced, there are those that are in the middle there, those at the bottom. How are we handling this? Otherwise, we are going to create some competitive economies outdoing the less competitive economies. And once these disadvantages arise, we will be in trouble in terms of everybody coming on board. So this has to be worked on. Where is industrialization policy for the continent? Because economics has shown us that manufacturing growth or manufacturing value added, as it grows in the countries, their per capita income increases and poverty is actually reduced drastically and dramatically. And when you look at East Africa has got an industrialization policy and a strategy, but its implementation is an issue. We need to work on that. And I think SADC has one. So where is the industrialization policy at the continental level? Because without industrialization, I can assure you, our dream will remain on the shelves. It will not be realized, because we need to transform our resources that we have, that I talked about, that others are looking at, and sell the final products. Not be at the value chain level where we are selling only commodities for others to add value and then send back to us. So to me, I think we need to look at industrialization as something serious. We still have skills gaps at the continent level and in different countries. We need to build the capacity of our people to work. Let me put it this way. In some regional integration groups, they even have people who are trained to work for them. In Africa, we are trained from different universities, some in America, some in Africa, some in Europe. And you bring all this together. Do we have Afrocrats, people who think ideologically like Africans to be able to implement some of these things? This to me is something ideological we need to look at. We don't need to underestimate this. As I perhaps come to almost my conclusion, the willingness of individual member states and their leaders to implement the agreement. We don't have to take this very lightly. In Africa, we are well known for signing and walking away. If we don't have strategies, if we don't have the willingness of the leadership to come up and say we need to realize the AfCFTA agreement, we may as well be not on the way to achieve what we want. And in light of that, we need how the national politics play with the AfCFTA, the relationship between the institutions, between the national institutions and the institutions at the continental level. This is extremely important to realize what we want. Otherwise, and even aligning of frameworks, aligning of policies, so that there are no disagreements between the two. Okay, we need to build the capacity to produce. That one is extremely important. You can't just have an agreement without the ability to produce, to sell. Okay, we need to pursue product diversification and sophistication at the continental level. There is need to innovate and attract investment at the continental level. We need to adopt very high standards, international standards for products to be able to navigate through. So to me, these are some of the issues pointed out, but I'm summarizing them into the external factors, the internal factors, to be able to pull the trade up to around maybe 30, maybe 40% intra-regional trade. Maybe that will give us some good results. Moderator, I've been so fast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Isaac Shinyokwa, for the insightful perspectives. And both your presentation, both your insights and Prudence's presentation triggered a lot of comments and questions, which I wish to read before Nada comes in, and which will form part of your panel second round of engagement. Seth Cummins is saying, how do the rules of origin apply to foreign-owned entities, or those entities with substantial foreign ownership that may not constitute majority operating within member states? And David Viremba is saying there are both external and internal incoherences in the implementation of AfCFTA. And he's asking, what commitments are countries making with other regions that are going to undermine implementation of the AfCFTA? Dr. Shinyokwa talked about those like the FTAs, such as the EPAs, UK, Kenya FTA, USA, Kenya FTA, Ghana, UK FTA. So the question is, how do these commitments with third parties affect the AfCFTA? He's also asking, how does the CFTA link up with other plans like the African mining vision, or he's wondering whether we are just looking at tariff liberalization. Fabian Wasson is asking, how do we prevent undue influence from corporations not originating from the continent? He's wondering whether the CFTA can be protected from countries and multinationals misusing African industries. David is asking about the status of program for infrastructure as an enabling factor in the implementation of the trading under the AfCFTA, because for his view, the current infrastructure is integrating not markets in Africa, but rather it is building roads and ports to facilitate exports of commodities to the outside world and imports from the outside world. Leonida Odongo is asking about that we have mechanisms in place to ensure that most of the vulnerable are protected from unfair competition, like farmers, petty women traders, and all that. And there's also a question coming up from Dr. Kabanda on what is envisioned to be the approach for harmonizing the AfCFTA and the already existing multilateral arrangements. He gives an example of the China, Africa, EU, Africa, Uganda, India, and all that. So how do we play with this? And again, he's asking, how are we looking at integrating informal traders across the African borders? What is the position of the AfCFTA when it comes to integrating informal cross-border traders? And of course, also two questions which is asking about how is the free movement of persons being eased as we are looking at trading under the AfCFTA? What is the question of movement of persons? Then there is a question on whether the current texts on rules of origin and tariff schedules, whether they are available, and if not, when they will be able to be available. These texts, as you upon and go to those questions, panelists, I bring in Nada. Nada comes with a lot of experience from the Arab Maghreb region, which is one of the biggest blocs of the African Union and which are building onto the African Continental Free Trade Area. Nada, in your perspective, in 5 to 8 minutes, do you think that the Arab Maghreb Union is a reliable building block in the implementation of the AfCFTA? When you look at it, some members seeking membership in the EU, like Morocco, when you look at the Arab Maghreb region, what do you think about it? Nada, to you, please.
Thank you very much for your very insightful for this panel and for this for the very insightful presentations of the guests. Basically, we have to start before deciding if the AMAU is reliable or not a block to constitute a part of this what is called the dream of a common trade area, African trade area. We have to look at the level of integration of the UMA itself. So since its foundation in 1989, we see it's among the least integrated blocks in Africa. We have the sense that it is rather countries that work every country on its own rather than working as a bloc, and countries are rather integrated north to economies like most of their exchange is with the European Union. Up to 60% of their exchanges are with the European Union than with each other. So some economists in North Africa speak about the costs of a non-Maghreb. So now we are speaking of a very low integrated economic region because, of course, of political problems. For instance, the lack also of political will, but also because of the non-conversion, because countries couldn't get to a point where they agree on harmonizing of non-tariff barriers and to start trading effectively. So with such a background, we cannot say. Also, one of the reasons maybe for the emergence of such a bloc is to guarantee and defend the interests of the countries of the Maghreb. But we find, for example, these countries negotiate trade agreements that are the most that constitutes the bulk of their exchange, for instance, with the European Union in an independent fashion. Tunisia negotiates on its own, Algeria on its own, Morocco on its own, and this is where the absence of this body is most felt. And here it is legitimate for us to ask the question of, is it really a reliable bloc? When we talk about a low integration, how do we, are these countries themselves imagining integrating or signed the agreement and ratified the agreement of the AfCFTA in a perspective of an economic bloc, or by apprehending their personal interests as countries? And this is the case of Tunisia. If we want to take Tunisia as a case study, the involvement of Tunisia in the signature and ratification of the AfCFTA was not a regional process, but an orientation that Tunisia takes since 2016, and even a little before, after 2011, in the opening up and liberalization of the economy. So it came with perspectives of deepening trade relationship with Europe with the DCFTA. It came with the subscription of to the Chinese initiative of Belt and Road. It came with the signature of the COMESA Treaty, and also it came in the context of speaking of even deepened the relationship with the US. So it's for this country, it's a whole orientation that the country takes. But it is very interesting. Now we are speaking about the rules and this dream, and also to speak about the acceptability of such a trade agreement among the people that will be most impacted, and which Mr. Prudence talked about as the people that will be benefiting from the elimination of poverty, income distribution, and the attraction of investments. And which is also not something we can be sure about, despite the numbers we have, because especially in the context of weakened economies after the COVID-19. In Tunisia, for instance, we have 10% of companies that shut down, and 65% of companies that are threatened with a definitive shutdown. We are in a situation of crisis, and this aspect of comprehensiveness in the AfCFTA poses questions as it doesn't really allow countries to protect themselves enough. We will be speaking when Tunisia negotiates the DCFTA with Europe. It said it is clearly not ready to liberalize, for example, its agriculture. Also, countries of developing countries in the WTO still wanted to slow down in some aspects, but these aspects, we have the impression that they are, I mean, in the AfCFTA, it is we are going rapidly into this liberalization. Does the AfCFTA provide the necessary protections for the most weak and most vulnerable in our economies, in terms of and now we know that the African economies that rely extensively on SMEs, do these SMEs have the capacity to compete in such an environment, or will it be a trade that will only favor the biggest actors? And so these questions, I think, should be asked. I will only end up maybe my contribution with speaking about the fact that when we started in Tunisia talking about free trade with relationship to Europe, the deepening of relationship with the DCFTA, there was a lot of opposition in the society in Tunisia because of the threat that it may be to open up in a comprehensive manner and to totally harmonize your rules and of trade, and to be able to open your market totally to foreign products that may be more competitive than yours. But when we ratified the AfCFTA, it didn't trigger this much. It wasn't that problematic. But nowadays, lately, we have seen the emergence of social movements protesting against the inflow of agricultural products, for example, from Egypt. And this is only, we are saying this because we say maybe that we didn't talk enough or about free trade in Africa as a society, or because we didn't think of our farmers that are very 80% small farmers that have very low access to funding and very low in terms of standards. How could they compete if other African products are on the market at a lower price for us? So while it may be better for consumers, for producers, it might represent a threat. So these are the questions maybe I wanted to pose here in this debate, and it's very important that we have the two perspectives, that of the institutions and that of the people on the ground. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nada, for the insightful views and perceptions. Dear participants, yes, we take note of your questions on the availability of the presentations and the recording. And I would like to assure you that, yes, we shall provide this both in email to your respective emails, and also they will be available on the Rosa Luxembourg Europe website. That is www.rosalax.eu. Now, we have 20 minutes to the end of this webinar. And this takes us to the second segment of the webinar, which is the panel. A lot of comments, a lot of questions, most importantly, have come up. And I have read some of those questions. And I would wish to start with the same order. Prudence. There are a number of questions regarding how rules of origin, whether they are applying to foreign-owned entities, regarding infrastructure, the role of infrastructure, and how it is whether it is integrating African economies to support the CFTA, the issue of integration of informal cross-border traders in the CFTA and the smallholder farmers, and most important also the issue of movement of workers, movement of persons. How is movement of persons working with in hand in hand with the movement of goods? And like I sent all the questions in the chat. So, Mr. Prudence, you may answer all the questions, or you may answer a few of them, and I'll give you 5 minutes. Please.
Good. Thank you very much, Kiza. I think by giving me 5 minutes will save me from responding to the most difficult questions. So I will leave them to other panelists. Yes, the questions are many, but let me just share my perspectives on each of them. With regard to rules of origin applying to foreign entities, first of all, you have to understand, if you are an investor, you can invest, then once you invest, your product will go to the market. So foreign entities that will invest in Africa, produced from Africa will also qualify for the AfCFTA rules of origin. So it's just a matter of their production base. I think this one answers to the question. What will be the approach to harmonize AfCFTA with other outside free trade areas? Let me answer to this together with the one who asked about countries making commitment with third parties. First of all, the AfCFTA is a free trade area, so which means that it is liberalizing trade among the parties, but it is not affecting trade relations of the parties with third parties. So AfCFTA is looking at trade liberalization among African countries, but it is not affecting trade relations between one Africa country and one European country or one Asian country or the US. But the relationship between one African country and the third party country may affect the AfCFTA. So the provision of the AfCFTA that addressed the issue states that if you are having a preferential trade arrangement with a third party, you have to extend the same preferences to the rest of AfCFTA members. So if you give an example, if Kenya is negotiating FTA with the US, once the FTA is concluded, all preferential treatment to US should be extended to members of AfCFTA. If Mauritius is doing the same with India, they make sure that the outcome of negotiation will also be extended to AfCFTA members. And this has to be done on basis of reciprocity. So a country that is giving you better preference than the general preference of the AfCFTA has to be also reciprocated. I'm trying to be quick. The relationship between AfCFTA and African Mining Vision, CADEP program, free movement of people, PIDA. Let me talk about them together. Yes, there is a relationship. All these are continental programs. AMV, African Mining Vision, is a continental program which looks at the beneficiation of the natural resources. So by addressing the issue of natural resources, you are contributing to the value addition, to developing continental value chains, which will lead to what AfCFTA aims at. So the AMV policy is looking at the first stage of production, which will assist AfCFTA, which will assist to boost intra-African trade. Rather than taking raw materials outside without processing them, you have to process them on the continent, produce for what is needed on the continent, but even if you sell the processed products, then you add value to the wealth of the continent. The CADEP is about agriculture as well. Agriculture, again, is the basis for production. So AfCFTA is dealing with products, with commodities. All products that are processed from agricultural products are going to the AfCFTA market. So if we can produce, if we can stop importing food from outside, produce our own food, we are contributing to the welfare of the continent. The free movement of people is part of the factors of production. Even if we have a separate continental framework or protocol on free movement of people, but implementation of that protocol is exactly complementing the AfCFTA, and soon or later, we'll be talking about African Common Market, which will also include movement of factors of production. The issue with the PIDA, one person talked about outward-oriented infrastructure. That the PIDA program, the program for infrastructure development for Africa, is looking at the ports and whatever that look for exports and import of goods from outside. I think I tend to agree with you the historical background of infrastructure development on the continent was based on colonial legacy. But I think the task of AfCFTA is to reverse that trend. Look at infrastructure that will link African countries, because infrastructure is one of the pillars of the AfCFTA. Infrastructure, industrialization, those are the two main pillars of AfCFTA. So the programs of PIDA have to be looked and address the infrastructure gap linking African countries. I think the last one is about how does AfCFTA address the issues of most vulnerable people. Let me look at it together with one person who asked about human rights. The benefits of the AfCFTA have looked at income distribution, poverty reduction, people's welfare. So the policies to address the issues of the most vulnerable people have to be at national level. In a bid for a country to implement AfCFTA policies, you have to put in place a strategy, and you have to make sure that your strategy looks at the production process. What products? Let me give you one example. How many people are involved in the cocoa value chain in Ghana? How does Ghana come up with a strategy that will assist everyone involved in the cocoa value chain to benefit from the AfCFTA market by securing market for cocoa products and ensuring that farmers, processors are also getting value from the AfCFTA market, rather than producing for export and maybe not getting the value of what they have produced. So the issues of human rights, issues of most vulnerable stakeholders have to be addressed by national strategies. So that's in a nutshell what I have to say in 5 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. Oh yes, there is a lot. I have a feedback among the participants that it should have been a 2-day conference. There's a lot that is really being here, and we need to know. Dr. Shinyekwa, in 3 minutes.
Yes.
To respond to some of the questions that were raised. Please.
Okay. I think Prudence has more or less dealt with the questions that I wanted to respond to, but I will just say 1 or 2, 3 things. One,
yes,
the CADAP, the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, is an extremely important program for us, as it tries to address trade in agricultural production. There are many other things in there. It addresses encouragement of free movement of persons within the African continent. It tries to address poverty issues and ETs, but from an agricultural angle, So, and it's in its 3rd phase right now. The 1st and the 2nd phase are over, and we are in the 3rd phase. We'll go through this up to, I think, 2025 to see if we are achieving the target set by the Malabo Declaration. Now, on the issue of Africa or African countries relating or signing FTAs with the other countries or regions within the global community, this one is a very tricky one, because these are sovereign states that have agreed to enter these FTAs, and therefore nobody has a right to stop them. The only thing is, in all the analysis that's done before entering into such arrangements, there's need to understand what are the likely effects. I'll just give you an example. If we sign, say one of the countries within the ESC signs an FTA agreement with say the United States, there are likely to be areas which may affect the region as a customs union. for that matter, because where the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is at an FTA level, some of these regs are already at a customs union level. So when you negotiate, there are issues that are likely to affect, say, the common external tariff. Or when the goods come in, say an example, if a lot of maize comes in from the US into one of the ESA countries, what happens to those who are selling maize to another country? If milk comes in, those are issues that need, like I said from the start, that need to be studied to understand the implications. Then another very serious point, many of these FTAs have got, should I call it a format, that has got WTO plus issues. And in most cases, many African countries are not likely to be ready or in a position to have the competencies to deal with some of these issues. And some of them have really been very problematic. Yes. I just want to give you an example. If we signed an agreement where the dispute settlement mechanisms involves state to company, I mean, you are likely to see state-to-state dispute settlement mechanisms. You are likely to see many countries losing cases and therefore required to pay very colossal amounts of money. So what I'm saying is that whereas it is okay to enter FTAs agreements with other countries and regions, there are issues that must be closely looked at. Otherwise, they are likely to be a very big problem. Yes.
As you're winding up, there's a question here which I think you could respond to.
Yes.
The issue of Edgar Dario of Economies Africa is asking how SMEs who constitute the majority of traders in Africa will be able to trade across the borders or in the CFTA. Maybe you could attempt that in your last parting shot.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually I was going to that one.
Thank you.
Strictly, we in some of these our countries, you have SMEs occupying a space of 80–70% of production, and therefore these are very interesting entities. Until they are protected, they are nurtured, they are helped. They have a lot of problems to be able to penetrate. Maybe through the business councils or so, through the private sector foundations within these countries and associations. These have to be helped, otherwise they may not be able to compete. SMEs in China, for that matter, I've been told there are about 70 SMEs. When you look at how the state helps them in terms of resources, in terms of looking for market, in terms of helping them even to go out, there's even a go out of China policy for them. That gives an idea that SMEs will not survive without sufficient help. There must be deliberate programs to look at their financing, to look at the ability for them to produce and the ability for them to market. Otherwise, they will not be able to compete favorably. So my thinking is these need special attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chinyekwa, for the insights. And before we come to the closing remarks, Nada, when you look at Arab Maghreb Union and the EU and the CFTA, what are your parting shots on that tripartite relationship between the AMO, EU, and the CFTA? Chris, your parting shots, 2 minutes.
It's very interesting here, not only to talk about the relationship between Europe, the Maghreb countries, and the African continent, but also all other companies that can have their headquarters in some region, and then let me give you a simple example. Tunisia in 2018 wanted to pass a law in the parliament that modifies definition of what a company, a Tunisian company, is defined, of how a Tunisian company is defined in Tunisian law. And it gives the right to any foreign capital to come establish itself in the country and become a Tunisian country, and become a Tunisian company. So by these rules, any European or American company can establish itself in Tunisia and then start trading with the rules that are that Tunisia uses in trade. So also there are programs like when we introduced the AfCFTA, there has been a lot of talk about this program called Prosper Africa last year, and how Tunisia can be, for example, an entry point to the African continent for foreign companies. And this may constitute an opportunity for Tunisia as a single country, but it may constitute also a threat for other countries or small producers. So it is very interesting to know also from if this represents, if this is one of the things that was taken into consideration in the establishment of the rules of the AfCFTA.
Okay, thank you so much, Nada. And as we come to the end of this, I would wish to call a distinguished and seasoned negotiator, the current head of the Competition Authority for Kenya, Ambassador Nelson Dilangu, to give us his words of wisdom, to give us his thoughts on the CFTA, but also across this webinar. Ambassador, Your Excellency, you are most welcome, and please, the floor or the mic is yours. Ambassador.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts in a very few minutes about the AfCFTA. But let me start by saying hello to Prudence. I don't think we have seen each other for about 2-3 years.
Yeah, hello, Ambassador. Hello, Ambassador.
How are you? How are you?
Good. Nice to see and hear your voice again.
Nice to see you too. Let me just say that we should pay more attention to the AfCFTA than thinking about third parties and what have you, because our industrial base will actually depend on how much we trade within ourselves. The other form of trade relations has been tried for a couple of years, decades to say, but we haven't moved much. We have an opportunity now as Africa to trade within ourselves and even to start industries that will be able to absorb our own goods. So in this respect, I think AfCFTA comes at the right time and we should embrace it. And I hope that soon all the 55 countries of Africa will be party to this agreement. Now, regarding the third-party trade agreement, I have this to say. I am not disagreeing with what Prudence has said, but there are two things that we need to take into consideration. One, whatever we do regarding countries signing with third parties, that should not undermine the African Continental Free Trade Area. That is important, that we don't undermine what we are doing within ourselves. The second one is to remember that within the AfCFTA trade agreement, I think there is a provision, and Prudence talked about it. And this provision talks about a country, if it signs, for example, Kenya has signed a bilateral FTA between itself and the UK. It is not automatic that other AfCFTA countries must enjoy the benefits. But if there are countries within the AfCFTA that are interested in enjoying the benefits created by that relationship between Kenya and the UK, they are free to do so. And Kenya will allow them, but on the condition that they also reciprocate. And I think Prudence has made it very, very clear. Now, there are a few things that we will need to address within the AfCFTA to make it work and work very fast. And I think migration is one of it. I think we do have a treaty on that. But we can look at what has happened within some regions. For example, within the East African region, there is free movement of people between, I think, between Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. And you'll be surprised we did not see an upsurge on that. And we can use that as an example now to extend to the whole of Africa, so that the businessmen can start moving and investing across the continent. Then, of course, I think there is somebody who asked a question about whether the AfCFTA protects local industries. I think it does, because you have trade remedies within the treaty, and there are specific rules that a state party has to follow to be able to provide that protection. So I think I should leave it there, because it wasn't my turn to give a speech, but just to make a small comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, Your Excellency, Ambassador Nelson Dilangu, for your words of wisdom and for your guidance and thoughts on this subject, and for closing us. I will not go beyond your official closing remarks. Just one housekeeping announcement that we shall be sharing the link for this Zoom meeting is on the YouTube of Luxembourg, Stiftung. We shall be sharing the presentation and the recording also in your personal emails, but also it shall be on the website. And lastly, to remind you that should you be interested in this conversation, we shall be looking at the issues of CFTA in the context of finance and external interest on the 6th of May 2021. I encourage you to join in. I encourage you to keep the discussions, and I encourage you to also keep safe and healthy. On behalf of the organizers here in Uganda and Luxembourg, Dar es Salaam, Bahrain, Dhaka, Tunisia, and Brussels offices, I would like to thank you so much and wish you a pleasant evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you may be hearing from. Thank you so much and stay well.
Thank you to Africa.
Thank you.
And bye to everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We cannot hear you.
Maybe we can end this now, and I will send a Zoom meeting for next week, and we can meet there and discuss about our webinar. Is it all right?
Of course.
Okay. Okay. I think many has left. Okay. See you.
Sorry, Arif, what? Did you say something?
Yeah, Africa. I will send you a Zoom meeting invitation, and maybe we can meet next week and talk about it.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
So I hereby sign out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.